Hey, what's up, YouTube? It's Christopher. Today, we're going to check out this Quilter Tone Block 202 head for guitar. You can see here I got a Line 6 pod go. I'm also going to show you how this thing sounds running a pod into it, or the pod go into it. So, first things first, let's go over the switches and knobs that are all on the amp. All the way on the left for the knobs here, we got a gain. Then we got a limiter, bass, middle, treble, reverb, master volume. Got your power switch right here. Underneath here, you've got a voice switch, which all the way left is FR, which if you don't know is full range, full response. It's meant to be a flat sound so that you can run a multi-effects pedal through it and it doesn't dirty up your sound or affect the sound of your pedal. Even when using emulated cabs or cabinets. Next we have the guitar input, which is here. Then we have an effects send, an effects return, a signal out, and then we have a little switch here that does multifunctions. So when it's on the left and you're using the effects send and return, it puts the effects send and return pre-amp. So you can have your effects come into the front instead of after the preamp, or you can set it to post so that your effects send and return is after the preamp. So that's pretty handy. You can get different types of pedals you want in the front, some pedals you want in the back, and depending on how you're using it, you can set it up for either or. Also, that switch works for the signal out. So if it's left, it's a line out, which you can run to front of house, or you can run to a audio interface and record using that. To the right, it turns this signal out into a headphone jack, which is a 1/4 inch jack, so you have to have a 1/4 inch set of headphones. So let's see how this thing sounds using the voices here. So the first voice is FR. In the middle, you've got what they call full Q, and then on the right, you've got what they're calling vintage. Okay, so I like the vintage tone myself, but I'm going to show you how they both sound. So right here, I'm turned down. Let's turn this up a little bit. So you can see my EQ's flat. My reverb's off. Let's turn this up a bit. And you'll notice when you turn these knobs that they're click knobs. So click, 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 every little position. So you can count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, where you are on the knob to get accurate returns if you were to change anything. So I'm going to put the reverb just about halfway. Maybe a little much. Let's go a little lower. Cool. I should also mention my guitar that I'm using today is my Fender Ultra Strat. Thing's awesome. I love it. So, let's see how this thing sounds here. So my gain is turned pretty low, which means my volume knob is affected by that. So even if I have this all the way up at 200 watts, it's pretty quiet in the room because my gain is only on, you know, a 1/4 of the gain. So if I turn that gain knob up, it will get significantly louder. So every click of the dial, that's pretty loud. That's going to rattle some things in my house if I do that. I should also mention that the gain is not a click knob, and neither is the master volume. So your limiter, your bass, middle, treble, and reverb are click knobs. The master and the gain are not. They're smooth knobs. Okay, so here's how it sounds in the vintage mode. And I should mention that it's just going from my guitar straight into the front of the amp. There's no pedals in between. The pod's not hooked up right now. So it's just a head clean. And It's a great sounding clean amp, man. This thing really is super duper clean, and it can get extremely loud. So let's play with the EQ a little bit. That's the low end. It gets pretty good. So you can get really glassy on that treble. And then the reverb, obviously you got none. Now the really interesting thing is when the reverb gets turned all the way up, your attack of your notes is kind of muted a little bit. You know what I mean? You can hear that pluck. And then all that reverb kind of masks it. So it's super, super clean and it sounds beautiful. That's the vintage mode. The full Q is more like a modern tone. But to me, it just sounds a little more damp. Or dampened, I should say. So I'm going to turn the gain up a tiny bit. Versus vintage. So you kind of get a little more meat into your sound when you're on the vintage versus in the full Q. It's good sounding, but it kind of softens your high end and your high mid range. So I personally prefer it in the vintage mode if I'm using the head straight up. So the other thing I want to talk about is the gain. So if I crank that gain right now, I'm going to blow the walls off of my house because this is so stupid loud where it is right now. So I'm going to turn this way down. I'm going to turn this gain all the way up, and this is how it sounds. So now when it's in this setting, you can hear the gain is up through the speakers without even playing. You can hear it hiss. And it's still fairly clean, but it breaks up. So it's got a really, really good sounding, almost breaking up clean tone. Now, the important thing about the gain knob is the limiter knob really, really affects the way that it works. So I have the limiter up where I would normally use it with my Pod Go, which is just 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 clicks to the right of 5 is what I use for my Pod Go. Now you'll hear the difference here. If I turn the limiter off, I get way more gain. Well, let's just correct that. It's not way more gain, but you can hear a lot more of the gain. Holy shit, that's loud. Excuse my French. So you're definitely not going to get anywhere near hard rock or metal tones with this. But this is a really good amp if you're going to do some, you know, Texas blues type of tone. You can get those kind of Stevie-ish, close to it, not quite, but... Okay, so that's with the gain cranked and the limiter off. As you turn the limiter off, you lose some hair off of the gain. Now, if I play with the EQ and I move everything up like 2 at a time, 1, 2, 1, 2, 1, 2, it gets louder because you're adding frequencies. Now, if I turn this limiter up more, I lose some of that gain. And it starts to clean up. And it starts to get spongy. You can hear it like compress it a little bit. And when you turn it all the way up, you lose a lot of volume. That's significantly lower volume than it was a second ago. So I have to actually turn up that much. So I have to get, you know, whatever that was, maybe 1/8 of the knob. So here's the neck pickup. It sounds awesome. It's a super, super good bluesy sounding amp. If you need it for that, it's awesome for it. So the difference between this in the vintage and the full Q at gain all the way up. Let's turn the limiter all the way down so you can hear the difference. Good Lord, that is loud. Versus vintage. So I think personally the vintage sounds a little clearer and a little more bumped up in the high frequencies and the high mid frequencies. So now let's hear what this sounds like when we put the pod into the FR. So what I like to do is I like to set my gain around 5, and I like my limiter at 1, 2, 3, 4 past the midpoint. I like to keep these guys all neutral at 5. I turn my reverb off, and now you plug this guy in. Oops, let's just do this. Take this out of the face. This goes into the input in the back of the pedal. And then I have this, which comes from the amp out and goes into the input here. And now my pod is hooked up. And it should be able to hear it. So let's see. So this particular patch is a lead patch, and it's got some gain on it. It's got some delay, reverb. Clean patch. you can hear that it actually works really, really good as a FR receiving head. So you can get this pedal to sound any way you want it. It's extremely versatile. I may or may not do a video straight for the Pod Go and go through it. I don't think I need to. I think if you look this up on YouTube, you're going to find 1,000 videos that'll be way more informative than anything I can give you. But it's a great pedal. I highly recommend you look at these pedals. I love this head if you're going to use this kind of a rig where you're using a multi-effects pedal, be it a Line 6 Pod Go or a Helix, or using a Fractal or something like that. You can send it out, and any of those pedals or any of those rack units you can send out to this amp and it'll sound really, really good. And I went this route instead of doing a FR cabinet, because I could get a really nice FR cab which is powered and will power this pedal no problem for around the same price. The reason I didn't do that is because this has an EQ on it. And what's good about having an EQ after your effects pedal is you make all your tones, you get it all set for your set list for the night, and you go out there and you play, and it sounds great in one room, it sounds amazing at your band rehearsal studio. You get out into these bars or clubs, wherever you're playing, and all of a sudden it just doesn't sound right. There's something that's just honky, or you got too much bass or not enough bass. You can then go into the head and adjust your EQ to the room that you're playing in, which to me is a really effective use of this. So whenever I make a patch using this pedal, I throw it in my head, I throw it through my cab. I like to keep these neutral, and then whatever tone I get in my rehearsal spot is set to neutral, and then I can tune it to the room. I can take away or add as I need it. So it's really, really great for that. Of course, there's not very many people playing shows right now, so when we do start to get out there and play shows again, which I'm very hopeful that we will, it'll be really, really great for that. So there you go. It's the Quilter Tone Block 202 and a little bit of the Line 6 Pod Go feeding it. I just wanted to show you that you can use this quite well, and it's actually designed for it. It has an FR full range, full response setting on it, so check that out. Total for this whole package here, I think I paid $550 for the head, and I paid around $450 for the pedal. So it's a fairly inexpensive rig as far as getting a crazy amount of tones. This thing, obviously, you can make it sound like anything you want it to sound like. It sounds fantastic. So there you go, Quilter Tone Block 202 with a Line 6 Pod Go. I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, give me a thumbs up. Let me know in the comments what you think. And I'll see you guys in the next video, YouTube. You take care and be nice. Bye-bye.